Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Malcolm Gladwell.
Thank you. That was, I'm very touched by that. Usually people only say things that nice about you when you're dead. And so I'm enormously grateful to the CJF for moving things up so I could be around to hear that. I was told I had a few moments, and I thought it would be a shame if I didn't take that time to share some lessons from my career, things that I've learned over the course of my time in journalism that maybe will be useful to some of the younger journalists here. Lessons that have really stayed with me and motivated and moved me over my life. First lesson has to do with when I was quite young. My father had a Peugeot 404, and as Peugeots of that era did, this one was always in the shop. It had a problem with the horn that wouldn't stop. It had a mind of its own. It would just go off and on. And so my father took it to the local dealer, and it wasn't fixed. He'd take it again, it wouldn't get fixed. He'd take it again, it wouldn't get fixed. Finally, in frustration, my father wrote a first-person essay in the voice of the Peugeot, talking about how hard it was to be a functional car if your horn didn't work. And when we went to pick up the car, the essay was taped to the steering wheel, and it had a grade of A-. And I remember being so enormously proud of my father in that moment for what he had accomplished with that A-. So proud, in fact, that I completely overlooked the fact that the horn still wasn't fixed. And that's my first lesson in journalism, which is that journalism can be enormously gratifying even when it doesn't make a whit of difference in the world. Second lesson, one that I feel even more deeply. Many years ago, I knew a guy named Steve who dated a friend of mine, and he wanted to do a book with this obscure economist, also named Steve. And they couldn't get anyone to blurb it, so they brought it to me and said, "We're stuck, no one knows who we are, will you blurb it?" And as it happened at the time, I was really into blurbs. I, for some reason, thought this was an art form I needed to master, and I used to send blurbs unsolicited to authors that I liked. One in particular, this is off topic, but I remember once I was really into Lee Child, and so I sent him a blurb which said, very proud of this one, "I used to read Lee Child in paperback. Then I couldn't wait, so I bought him in hardcover. Then I asked a friend of mine in publishing to send me galleys, and now I break into his house and look over his shoulder as he types." Who wouldn't use that blurb? And he never used it. Anyway, still upset about that. Anyway, I was pleased to do a blurb, so I did a blurb, which I was into simple blurbs at the moment, and it was just "prepare to be dazzled." And they thought that was great, and so they said, "We're going to put it on the front of the book, Prepare to be Dazzled, Malcolm Gladwell." And that Steve was a guy named Steve Dubner, and the other Steve was a guy named Stephen Levitt, and the book that they wrote was called Freakonomics. And if you look at the Freakonomics, it says on the front, "Prepare to be Dazzled, Malcolm Gladwell." Well, after that book came out, I found myself being stopped on the street by people who said, "You know, when you write that thing about how abortion caused the drop in crime in New York, or that stuff about the economic meaning of various children's names, that was just fantastic. I love that." And of course, I never wrote that. The Freakonomics guys did. I realized that because my name was on the front, they thought I wrote it. And that's the second lesson, which is the fastest and most efficient way to improve your reputation in journalism is to be mistaken for someone else. Third lesson, and this is the last lesson because I realize I'm way out of time. I only had 3 minutes, I'm well past it. And really the most important lesson, when I was graduating from the University of Toronto, I couldn't get a job. It was 1984. There were no jobs. And I all these rejection letters on my wall. And finally, a classmate of mine who I realized, I should think about tonight, it was actually Nigel Wright, came to me and he said, he used to subscribe to this magazine, this sort of disreputable right-wing magazine out of Indiana called The American Spectator, which I'd never heard of, and he showed me that they had an ad for an assistant managing editor in the back. paid $9,000. And so I was so desperate that I applied, and they sent me an application to fill out, which was 5 pages. And you had to fill out stuff about yourself, and then they just asked one question, and you had 3 pages to answer it, and it was, why do you want to work at the American Spectator? Now, of course, I didn't want to work at the American Spectator. I wanted a job in Toronto, but I couldn't get one. I had never heard of the American Spectator, so what should I do? I just wrote, doesn't everyone want to work at the American Spectator? And, of course, I got the job. And the lesson of that story is as pertinent to me today as it was to the American Spectator back then, which is a little flattery goes a long way, even when it is largely undeserved. So thank you very, very, very much.